Okay, so I'm Jonathan Sparks with Sparks Law. We're going to go over the question that some wonderful clients of ours had as whether or not you should include your spouse in your business, in the business ownership or not on any of that documentation. So there's a lot of kind of pros and cons with this, assuming that your spouse is cool with sort of either situation. So we're just going to kind of go through some notes. So for one, it helps that spouse with their credit a little bit because they're probably on the business bank accounts and the business credit cards and that sort of thing. It helps with the banking. Very often, in my experience, you will need your spouse to go to the bank for you, and in theory, your spouse is like totally trustworthy and they can make withdrawals and deposits and run payroll and things like that. It helps with the management of the company. So if you want your spouse to be also a manager or certainly have authority to manage the company, make hiring and firing decisions, or help out in your absence if something, God forbid, happens to you, that's like a quick and easy thing for them to do. There's also some benefits if and only if you have a legitimate minority-controlled business situation. Sometimes if you're, say, you have a plumbing company, you might, if your spouse is a minority, but you're not, then it might help for you to get some special benefits from like government subsidies or government contracts that you might get because it's a minority-controlled company. There's a lot of factors in there, and that's not exactly kind of outside the scope of this video, but that is a possibility. So if you're a contractor and you're going after bids for government contracts or anything like that, that might be something to consider. There's a trust and estates element to it. So if you, God forbid, pass away tragically, then what happens to the company? If your spouse is already a member or a manager or an owner with you, that sort of tees them up so the company transfers right away. It's a really simple thing. If they're not, there could be some problems where it sort of gets frozen in probate. This is unlikely because if you have a will or if you just go by the default estate plan basically that the state gives you normally, I'm not sure if it's all states, but certainly Georgia will give your property to your spouse if they're surviving you after you pass. So they're basically going to own the company anyway. Not sure if this is relevant for most of you, but that's a little different with lawyers and some other professionals like doctors, I believe, because non-lawyers or non-professionals might not be able to own a company for very long if they're not licensed. So if I were married and passed away and my inheriting spouse was not a lawyer, there would be sort of a problem there. You can fix all of that with what's called a buy-sell agreement in your partnership agreement, even if it's just a single owner corporation or LLC or whatever. Just give us a call. We can help you out with that. And the last thing is the family law aspect. Generally speaking, and this is kind of out of my expertise, so all the family lawyers listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that in general, anything that you come into ownership of after a marriage is considered normally marital property. So if you were to get a divorce and you set up the business after the date of marriage, your spouse or ex-spouse at that point would probably own a significant percentage of it, maybe half, maybe more, regardless of what you put into your partnership agreement with him or her, if anything at all. So that's another thing that sort of gets worked out in the family law courts, should that be the scenario. So feel free to leave any questions or comments, and have an awesome week.